As you already know, Webb has begun releasing response videos to my earlier documentary, MoonFaker Exhibit D. His video on the Parkes Observatory leaked prior to its intended release, allowing me to release a critique of that video. My critique was titled, MoonFaker, Australia and the Conspirators. Before continuing with his attack on Exhibit D, Webb released a 5-part video response to my Australia and the Conspirators. The 5-part series has to be by far the weakest pro-NASA video since Astro Grant 2's video on reflected light. There are actually only 2 points that warrant my attention. Firstly, Webb continuously alleges that I never mention that the Tidbinbilla Communications Complex in Canberra is NASA's facility in Australia.
Although Jarrah acknowledges NASA's tracking stations at Goldstone and Madrid, he avoids mention of Canberra in his Exhibit D series.
This is an outright lie by Webb, because I did mention this. In both Exhibit D and my Australia and the Conspirators, I prominently showed a clip from the ABC series Catalyst in which the Tidbinbilla complex is visited and clearly stated as being part of NASA's deep space network.
000 908 030.
I'm at the Deep Space Complex at Tidbinbilla, just outside of Canberra, and here's where they track all the spacecraft in the solar system, right from the quite close, like the SOHO probe that's monitoring the sun, through to the most distant. This facility is one of 3 in the world that make up NASA's Deep Space Network.
To have a network that can provide communication to all the spacecraft anywhere in the solar system, you need them separated by about 1/3 of the world each. So a good 120 degrees line either side runs nicely through Australia. Ended up being the best spot.
Now this dish is probably the most famous here, is it?
Yeah, this is the dish originally from Honeysuckle Creek that actually returned the very first images of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the surface of the moon way back in July 1969.
Roger, Bruce, we watched it all.
In his critique of both documentaries, Webb used clips that came before and after this section, so he had to have known that I have always specified that Tidbinbilla is NASA's facility. Second, Webb continuously tries to paint the Parkes Observatory as independent verification, claiming that it was owned and operated by the CSIRO, not NASA. Owned by the CSIRO? Yes. Operated by the CSIRO? Not during the Apollo days. As I prominently showed in my Australia and the Conspirators video, all operations at Parkes during the Apollo days were carried out under the control of NASA. Not only was Parkes part of the NASA manned spaceflight network, NASA's Robert Taylor was in charge of the operations during the Apollo days and controlled all the data that Parkes relayed to the network. Webb completely ignored this in his critique. Hard to imagine why.
Hey guys, did I do a great job of misrepresenting the facts or what? Did I adequately ignore the multitude of glaring facts that contradict my claims?
After officially releasing his Parkes video, Webb released another video. This one was on the TETR-A satellite, something which I never mentioned in any of my videos. The mere fact that he should even bring it up, even as filler material, is a clear indication of how weak Webb's arguments are getting.
The flight controllers in the Mission Control Center, MCC, read only what was on their computer screens and wouldn't have known where the data came from. Thus, it can be argued the MCC flight controllers could be fooled by simulated data.
These statements from J. Windley and Robert Braeunig are nothing short of astonishing, because this is exactly the scenario that Bill Kaysing discussed vividly in his book.
Astonishing? Ha! Not when you consider that these excerpts are Windley and Braunig's restatement of a claim made by Bart Sibrel, not Kaysing, that the TETR-A satellite was used to relay simulated data to ground controllers, and this claim only accounts for telemetry data. There was also voice and TV communications during the live transmissions that could not be simply generated by a computer somewhere. If you look at the way Windley and Braeunig have laid out their websites, each section starts by stating a moon hoaxer's claim, in boldface, followed by a thorough debunking, In this case, Jarrah quotes the restatement of Sibrel's claim, then totally ignores the following rebuttal. By misrepresenting what Windley and Braeunig actually said, Jarrah has created a classic strawman fallacy.
No, I didn't. I never mentioned TETR-A in my video series. Contrary to what Webb says, the passages I quoted are not even a restatement of Sibrel's claims. What I quoted was part of their rebuttal. If you look at the quotes from Windley's and Braunig's websites, I simply quoted the sections in which they specifically talk about simulating flights to the moon for training purposes. Before discussing the flaws with Sibrel's TETR-A theory, Braeunig and Windley discuss how a satellite is not needed to fool the MCC controllers, because the MCC controllers were trained for these missions by being fed simulated data over the landlines. Furthermore, the MCC controllers don't need to know or care where the data comes from. And so, if NASA wanted to fool the MCC controllers, all the NASA manned spaceflight network would need do is relay simulated data over the landlines to Houston. That's what I quoted Windley and Braeunig on. I misrepresented nothing the two said. I didn't quote what they said about TETR-A because it was irrelevant to the topic at hand. The topic was specifically about fooling the MCC controllers using simulated data. And since the two confirmed that the MCC controllers can be fooled by simulated data, not a satellite, I quoted them on that. That's all.
TETR-A was used to train MSFN dish operators on how to follow a satellite in Earth orbit. It circled the Earth every 92 minutes. The Moon takes close to a month to circle the Earth, so claiming that an operator wouldn't be able to tell whether he was following TETR-A around the Earth or a spacecraft on its way to the Moon is ludicrous.
Then it's a good thing that I never claimed TETR-A was used to fool the manned spaceflight network, isn't it? Quite frankly, why should I even claim that the manned spaceflight network was fooled by anything? NASA owns the manned spaceflight network. The manned spaceflight network consists of Goldstone Tracking Station, the Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex, Honeysuckle Creek, Tidbinbilla, Carnarvon Tracking Station, and yes, Parks. These are the very individuals who I suspect were involved in the conspiracy. So, why should I claim that the manned spaceflight network was fooled by TETR-A?
As for Jarrah's presentation of statements from Windley's website, I find it interesting that he chops the text from his website into two screens. Why do you think Jarrah did that? Well, if you put the two parts back together and compare what he shows in his video to the actual text at Windley's website, you see that Jarrah left out the first sentence of the second paragraph, which says, because of the design of the MSFN, a satellite was not required to train the MCC controllers. Windley is telling how simulations were easy to set up at MCC if you took the MSFN operators out of the picture. Of course, you'd only know what Windley was talking about if you include the second paragraph's main sentence. Can you say fallacy of omission? Can you say straw man? I can.
It's no fallacy of omission and it's no straw man. The first sentence was left out purely because, again, it was not related to the subject. I was discussing the ability to fool the MCC with simulated data, that's all. Both Windley and Braeunig state that it's possible to fool the MCC with simulated data. This was purely the reason I cited them. Never did I claim that a satellite would be needed to fool a manned spaceflight network. In the very previous section, I pointed out that NASA's manned spaceflight network was the fox guarding the henhouse. Webb has completely misrepresented my position and tried to pin the TETR-A theory on me, even though nowhere did I even mention TETR-A.